Hello, guys. Good afternoon, good evening. Hello, Monte. Hello. I hope you guys, hey, Alex, I hope all you guys can hear me. Nice to see you. Hello again, David. Hey, Ernesto, Monte. Anyone else here yet? Let's see. All right, great. Well, that's a few of you to begin with. Let's see if we get any more late arrivals, as usual. So I hope all you guys are okay. The topic of today's webinar is going to be conditionals. So something a little bit grammatical today. Obviously, last time we did a bit of work with some writing, upgrading your CV and what have you, but this week it's back to grammar. So let's begin. Here we go. Let me share my screen with you guys. Wonderful. Here we go. So today we're going to focus specifically on the second, third, and mixed conditionals. Now, if any of you are in any doubt about what that means and what that refers to, don't worry. I'm going to explain everything over the course of today's webinar. Great, so let's begin. So first of all, we need to define what conditionals are. So what are we talking about when we're talking about conditionals? So conditional sentences are sentences composed of two clauses. Now we've spoken about clauses before. Clauses are sort of units of language that contain, as a minimum, a subject and a verb. All right, and that makes it a clause. And when we make a conditional, we need two clauses. One contains if, so that's also called the conditional clause. It's the clause that contains the condition, which we usually form with if, and then the result clause, or the consequence clause, or the main clause. Has lots of different names depending on which grammar book you're reading. But that's the basis of a conditional, that we have two clauses, one of them with the condition and the idea of if, and then a second clause to express a result or a consequence. And that's what makes a conditional. Okay, great. So here's a couple of examples of conditionals. If you send it today, it'll arrive on Thursday. Or it'll arrive on Thursday if you send it today. So this is the first point that I want to make about conditional sentences, is that you can put the clauses with the if clause first and the result clause second, or in the reverse. You can have the result clause first and then the if clause second. It really doesn't matter which way around you do it. There's one little difference between the two phrases, apart from the order. Can anyone notice a little difference between the two phrases? Yes, indeed. Yeah, I see some of this. Yeah, comma, exactly. So the comma, thank you, Monse, thank you, Monica. Exactly, yeah, it's a comma. So if you put the if clause first, comma, you need to use a comma. Yeah. If you have the if clause second, you don't use a comma. Extra bonus point, you guys, if you can tell me what kind of conditional this is. It has a specific name. Is anyone feeling brave? Tell me, what kind of conditional do you think this is? Remember, they haven't. Yes, Alex, it's a first conditional, exactly. And we know that it's a first conditional because it's composed of if with the present and then will for the future. Here we have will as part of the contraction, it'll, but it's still will. You could also do it with going to, these things, but we need if with the present and then the future. Great. So this is what conditionals are. We also need to consider what conditionals aren't, because it can be a little bit confusing sometimes. The conditional tense or the conditional mood, it's a difficult one to categorize. In reality, it's neither a tense nor a mood. Would is actually a modal verb in English. Having said that, it's probably more useful to think of it as a tense or a mood. So if I say a phrase like, for example, I wouldn't swim in the Llobregat, that's not a conditional. not in the sense that we're talking about today anyway. Would obviously forms the conditional tense or the conditional mood. Yeah, no nadaria. You can see it's got this conditional tense or this conditional mood, but it's not a conditional in the sense we're talking about today. And we know that because there's no condition, there's no if, or there's no idea of if. It's just a simple statement, one clause, I wouldn't swim in the Llobregat. Or the second example refers to the past, no lo habría hecho así, I wouldn't have done it like that. And again, that's not a conditional in the sense that we're talking about today. Now, you're going to see these constructions, you're going to see a lot of would have, and all these things inside conditionals, but they're not conditionals themselves. And that's the important point. So good, what conditionals are and what conditionals aren't. Great, let's continue. So how many types of conditional are there? Let's have your guesses, please, guys. Tell me in the chat, how many types of conditional are there? Okay, Montse's gone for 4. Alex is going for 4 as well. Okay. 3 and mixed. Okay, well, 3 and mixed. Okay, so more or less 4 in total. Not yet, guys. No one has the correct answer yet. More guesses, please. I'll give you a clue. It's higher. The number is higher than the number you put. 4 and mixed. Okay, more or less, Montse, more or less. The number I'm going for is 6, actually. The number I'm going for is 6. Now listen, officially there are 4, but then we can add the mixed conditional. And there are actually 2 different types of mixed conditionals, which means in the end, we get 6. Yeah, 6 conditionals. My God, a lot of conditionals. So in today's webinar, we're not going to look at all of them. I'm going to tell you what they all are now, but then we're going to focus in on just 4 of them. The second, the third, and the 2 mixed ones. So let's have a look. First of all, a 0 condition. If you heat water, it boils. If with the present, comma, present again. So that's a 0 conditional. It's one of those conditionals that's kind of not really a conditional. It's just a fact. We use these 0 conditionals just to talk about general facts or general truths, things that are always true. You know, that's just a fact, isn't it? If you heat water for enough time, it boils. So if with the present, comma, present again. So that's a 0 conditional, not the focus of today's webinar, just to give you a flavor. A first conditional, which we actually already spoke about. I'll go on holiday in August if I have enough money. So that's will for the result clause, and then the if clause with the present. See, this one's reversed in comparison with the first example. So that's the first conditional. Now, the second conditional, yes, we're going to look at this in more depth today. Here's just to give you a little taste. If I had enough money, I would go today, yeah? Something like a si tuviese suficiente dinero, iría hoy mismo. If I had enough money, I would go today. So that's the second conditional. Next, we've got the third conditional. If I hadn't missed the bus yesterday, I would have arrived on time. And I'll give you a little translation just to give you the flavor. Si no hubiera perdido el autobús ayer, habría llegado a tiempo. Alrighty, so that one's all in the past, all refers to the past. Then we've got a mixed one. So this is the first of our mixed conditionals. This example is actually passive. If I had been born, it's si hubiera nacido. If I had been born in the year 2000, I would be 20 now. Tendría 20 años right now. Yeah. So past if clause, present result. And the second type is basically the same idea, but reversed. So this time we've got the if clause in the present. If I were a Spanish citizen, si fuera español, habría votado, I would have voted in the last general election. So, don't worry guys, we're going to look at all of these in much more depth. This is just to give you a flavor of all the different conditionals. So, count them up guys, 6 in total. Crazy, all righty, let's go. So, one by one, as I said, we're not going to speak today anymore about the 0 and first conditionals. Forget about them. We're going to begin with the second conditional. Here we go. So before we kind of look at the structure, some important facts about a second conditional. Both clauses, both the if clause and the result clause, refer to the present, or in fact the future. Now, often when we talk about the present in grammar, when we're talking about grammar, we have this idea of we call it the anytime present. For example, if I say my name is Patrick, that's in the present, obviously, my name is Patrick, but it's this anytime present. You know, my name was Patrick yesterday, it will be Patrick tomorrow. It's this kind of anytime present that we use for facts. You know, Barcelona is on the coast. Yeah, yesterday, tomorrow, in 100 years, 100 years ago, it's just a fact. So often in grammar, when we talk about the present, we actually have this idea of the anytime present. Not, you know, for example, like the present continuous. I'm giving a webinar now. That's not the anytime present, that's right now. Yeah, just to give you a little bit of comparison. Okay, great. So second conditionals refer to the present, the anytime present, the present present, or indeed the future. And they're hypothetical. They refer to hypothetical conditions. So the condition that we're talking about is hypothetical. And the result is the probable result of that hypothetical condition. Okay, the probable result of a hypothetical condition. So let's have a look at how we form them. Let's get into the grammar a little bit. So if plus the past tense, then we've got our comma, followed by would and a bare infinitive. So what's a bare infinitive? It's the infinitive without to. So for example, an infinitive would be, in Spanish, an infinitive could be comer. In English, the translation of comer is to eat, because in English, all the infinitives begin with to eat. And a bare infinitive is when we use this infinitive without to. So we just say eat. Okay, so if with the past tense, comma, and then would go, would eat, would be, would like, would have, whatever. Would plus a bare infinitive. Now there's one point that I want to make really, really, really clear right now, which is, this is a bit confusing. You see if with the past tense, but it refers to the present. So this is absolutely correct, but it's a little bit confusing. So just be really careful, yeah? If I say, for example, if I had, so you think had is past, if I had £1 million, I'm not speaking about the past. I'm speaking about a hypothetical present. If I say, if I had £1 million, I'm saying si tuviera or si tuviese, yeah? I'm not saying si tenía, si tuve, no. I'm not speaking about the past. And that's a really important point to make, yeah? When you see the past tense in this context, with this subjunctive idea, doesn't refer to the past. It refers to a hypothetical present, yeah? Si tuviera mucho dinero, I don't have a lot of money, pero si tuviera. I don't have a lot of money, but if I had a lot of money, I would, whatever, buy a sports car. All right, there we go. So that's the structure of a second conditional. It's hypothetical and it's present. We use the past tense, but it's present. And that's our second condition. So now I would like to take a look at a few examples, examples that I think are quite instructive in terms of using a second conditional. So let's have a look at those. The first one, I think is just a nice, clear example of a second conditional. Si viviera, if I lived in Manchester. So you see the past simple tense. If I lived in Manchester, my English would probably be better. All right, so we've got would, then you see the bare infinitive, be. Yeah, would to be, no, would be. In this case, I put an adverb, probably, to add this idea of a bit more doubt, but absolutely perfect. My English would probably be better. Wonderful, nice clear example, second conditional. The second example, I've reversed it. I put the result clause first and the if clause second. So there's no comma. I would go out tonight if I didn't have this awful headache. So obviously when we form the past tense in the negative in English, we use the auxiliary didn't to form the negative followed by the present verb. Okay. Saldría esta noche si no tuviera, if I didn't have this awful headache, yeah? But unfortunately, it's all hypothetical. I'm not going to go out because I do have this awful headache, yeah? It's all hypothetical. I'm just making a supposition. I'm imagining what I would do if I didn't have this headache. Okay, so there's a nice example with a negative one, with the clauses reversed. Okay, third example. If you became a millionaire, do you think the money would change you? So this one's another second conditional, of course. It's absolutely correct. But in this case, I've added a little something in the middle. I've added a little do you think? And this is perfectly acceptable. No problem. We can do this. We're allowed to do this. If you became a millionaire, there's your if clause. Now, the second part is actually a question, and I've made it with two clauses. Do you think? And then the money would change you. Yeah. So no problem. We can mess with them a little bit. We can add extra information in different verbal tenses, but you can see the two parts that I've underlined are the parts that form the second conditional itself. Yeah. I could do it without the do you think. I could say, if you became a millionaire, would the money change you? No problem. And then it's maybe a little bit simpler. Or do you think the money would change you in indirect speech? Okay, great. So next example. Okay, even if I was a millionaire, I still wouldn't buy a fast car. So what have I done this time? I've changed it a little bit, haven't I? In this case, I've used even if. Even if. Okay, but it's still a second conditional. It's still grammatically, it's still a second conditional. Even if I was, so that's in the past simple tense, even if I was a millionaire, I still wouldn't buy a fast car. Now, if we're translating these ones, this one would actually be an aunque. We studied this in a previous webinar, the many uses of even. We use this idea of even if and even though. And yeah, even if and even though, aunque fuera millonario, igualmente no compraría un coche rápido. Even if I was a millionaire, I'm not, but even if I was a millionaire, I still wouldn't buy a fast car. So I've added the word even, and I've also added the word still to give a bit more emphasis to the phrase. I could say it without, no problem. If I was a millionaire, I wouldn't buy a fast car. Absolutely correct. But I want to make it a bit more emphatic, yeah? Aunque fuera, even if I was a millionaire, I still wouldn't buy a fast car. All righty. The still in this phrase is something like an igualmente, and the even if is something like an aunque. All right, great. We're getting a bit more technical now. Okay, so the next one's a question. If you were really hungry, could you eat a whole chicken yourself? Again, a nice instructive example, and I think it's a nice instructive example because this is the only conditional on this slide where you don't see the word would. All the other conditionals had the word would, second conditionals. So can, the modal verb can, is actually the only verb in English that has a kind of different conjugation in the conditional. For example, if you want to put the word eat in the conditional, eat, you say would eat. If you want to put go in the conditional, would go. Yeah, if you want to have speak in the conditional, would speak. So with all the verbs in English, we just say would and then the verb. But actually with can, it's a modal verb, and we're not allowed to use two modal verbs together. So in fact, with can, we don't say would can, we say could. So if you're forming a second conditional, you're going to use would every time, except the cases in which you want to express this idea of maybe possibility or ability, in which case you can use could. So it's a hypothetical question. Yeah? What do you think? If you were really hungry, could you eat? You know, the other option would be to say, would you be able to eat? Absolutely fine, the same idea. Could you eat, or would you be able to eat a whole chicken yourself? Okay, wonderful. Next one. So, I'd. So this one's a contraction, and it's a contraction, of course, of I would. So we've gone for I'd ask my manager if I were you. Now, this one's a really important one to remember because it's such a typical way to give advice in English. If I were you, if I were you. Now, if someone comes to you with a problem, and listen, I had a big argument with my girlfriend and I don't know what to do. I'd say, well, listen, if I were you, I would blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's a really nice way to give someone advice. And again, you can begin with if I were you, or you can put the advice and then if I were you at the end. You know, I would buy her some flowers if I were you, or if I were you, I would buy her some flowers. Yeah, both of those are absolutely fine. Again, really nice to include the contractions if you can as well, especially, well, in speaking. All right, one more example. Now, where is the word if? It's not there, it's not there. So this is the first conditional that we've seen today that doesn't include the word if. It includes the word unless. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the word unless, it's like the negative if. It means if not. So, I couldn't afford to travel around the world unless I won the lottery. It's the same as saying if I didn't win the lottery. Yeah? So the only possibility for me to travel around the world would be winning the lottery, yeah? I couldn't afford to travel around the world unless I won the lottery. For those of you who might not be familiar with the phrase afford, like can afford or to be able to afford, it means to have enough money to do something. If you can afford something, you have enough money to get it, to obtain it, to buy it, to pay for it, etc. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so now I want to break it up with something a little bit interactive. So I've got some questions for you guys. Well, one question basically, right or wrong, correct or incorrect. So I'm going to put some phrases on the whiteboard or on the slide, and I want you guys to tell me if they're correct or incorrect, yeah? So for those of you with your cameras switched on, I can see some of you, but not all of you. Probably better to write it in the chat. Right or wrong? What do you think? If she were taller, she'd be a great basketball player. Right or wrong? Okay, Monica says right with a question mark. Monse says right, a bit more confident. Good. This is my poker face. I'm neither confirming nor denying. Okay, I'll tell you guys, well done, you're right. That's an absolutely correct sentence, yeah. Is there anything that looks a little bit strange about that phrase? Does anyone see something that grammatically is a little bit interesting? Interesting. It's interesting to me. There's one particular verb conjugation. Yeah, for me, what looks strange, well, it doesn't really look strange for me. Good, Monse, exactly, yeah. She were instead of she was. Normally, when we speak in the past simple, the correct conjugation is was, isn't it? If I say yesterday Monse were at the cinema, no, that's wrong. Monse was at the cinema. But when we form second conditionals, it is possible to conjugate the verb to be as were for all persons. So I, you, we, they, he, she, it, all of them, you can use were. Now listen, that's not an obligation. You can also use the normal conjugations of the past simple, no problem. You could say if she was taller, that's absolutely fine. But so is if she were taller. So when you're making a second conditional and the main verb in the if clause is the verb to be, you can use were for all persons. Or you can use the normal conjugations of the past simple tense. It's one of those things that's kind of changed with time. You know, if you had taken an English exam, 30 years ago, they would say, no, were, must be were. Nowadays, it's a bit more flexible. People say was and were. It's one of those things that kind of depends on whether you believe in prescriptive or descriptive grammar. I'm personally in the second camp, the descriptive grammar camp. So there you go. If she were taller, she'd be a great basketball player. Correct. Next one. If I wouldn't have so much free time, I wouldn't go out so much. Correct or incorrect? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs down from Alex. Incorrect from Monse. Very good. I agree, guys. This one's wrong, yeah. We need to replace one word. We need to replace the word wouldn't with the word didn't. And then we're correct, yeah? Si no tuviera, if I didn't have so much free time. Good, I agree. So far, so good. What about this one? If I could sing, I would join in with the karaoke. Correct or incorrect? David says correct. All right, poker face. Monse says correct. Alex says incorrect. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the suspense is killing me. Let me reveal the answer. So it's correct. It's actually correct. But I put this one here specifically to kind of catch you guys out because it's a really difficult one. Because I explained on the previous slide that could was the conditional, right? And if could is the conditional, it shouldn't be in the first clause. It should be in the result clause. But could is not always conditional. Could is also the past of the verb can, isn't it? So actually, you can form a conditional with could in both clauses, a second conditional. If I could sing, I could join in with the karaoke, would be fine as well. So yeah, I apologize, Alex. That was a really tricky one. I got you. If I could sing, si pudiera, yeah? Not si podría, si pudiera. If I could sing, I would join in with the karaoke. So that one's actually correct. It's a good one. All right, good. Next. If I was you, I wouldn't talk to him today. He's in a really bad mood. If I was you, I wouldn't talk to him today. Correct or incorrect? One says gone for were. Okay, so were is another option. But is it wrong to say was? Yeah. Yeah, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. Yeah, exactly, Monse. Yeah, exactly. To be honest, I prefer were. For me, it just sounds much nicer. It sounds more natural for me personally, but it's not a mistake. As I said, you can use were for all persons, or you can use the normal conjugations of the past simple tense. I was, no problem. Okay, so two options, yeah. If I were you, is probably the more natural one for me. It's almost like a fixed phrase, you know, like a fraseggia. But grammatically, that's absolutely correct. If I was you, I wouldn't talk to him today. But I prefer were. Good. Okay. What would you do if I sang out of tune? A bonus point if you can tell me the name of the song. This is a lyric of a song. Pretty famous one. At least in the sort of Anglophone world, anyway. So, is it correct or incorrect? And what's the song? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you this one because we don't have too much time. It's correct. The song is I Get By With a Little Help From My Friends. I think it was the Beatles originally, and Joe Cocker did a really famous cover of that one. Yeah, there you go. And once they know, it's good. So fantastic. What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Good. So let's continue. We're going to move on now to our third conditionals. I'm conscious of the time, as always. I'm running over. So the third conditional. So we finished with the second for now. We'll move on to the third. So both clauses this time, the if clause and the result clause, are in the past. Everything's in the past. When you form a third conditional, it's all in the past. Okay? It's hypothetical. It's all hypothetical, and it's all in the past. So we have a hypothetical condition, and then the probable result or the probable consequence of that past condition. All in the past. So, third conditionals are formed in the following way. So this is the boring part, the grammar. We've got if with a had and then a past participle. That's what we call the past perfect tense. Had gone, had been, had looked, had eaten, had watched, etc., etc. And then we have what we call the perfect conditional. Would, have, and a past participle. So that's your habría ido, habría comido, habría vivido. Yeah, any past participle. Would, have, past participle. And as always, it's reversible. You know, habría ido si hubiera no sé qué. I would have gone if I had blah, blah, blah. Okay, and that's the basics of our third conditional. Yeah? That's how we form them. Wonderful. So let's take a look. We're going to have a look at some, well, another kind of list of nice instructive examples. So let's go. As usual, guys, if I can see some of you making notes and these things. If you don't have time to make notes, I'll give you my email at the end. You can email me. I'll be more than happy to send you all the slides that we've used in the presentation today. Cool. So examples. Here we go. So the Titanic sank. That's a fact. Yeah, everyone knows it. It happened in the past. So if we make a phrase like this, if the Titanic hadn't sunk, sink, sank, sunk, sink, when it goes down in the water. If we say if the Titanic hadn't sunk, that's hypothetical, isn't it? Because the Titanic sank. And a lot of people died. So if we imagine a situation in which those people didn't die, that's hypothetical. So it's all hypothetical and it's all in the past. If the Titanic hadn't sunk, hypothetically speaking, if the Titanic hadn't sunk, all those people wouldn't have died. All in the past. Yep, the if clause, the result clause, all in the past. Here's another example, reversed, but exactly the same idea. I wouldn't have missed the start or the beginning of the film if I hadn't missed the bus. So remember, miss is perder in this context. It could be lose, but in this context it's miss. No habría perdido el principio de la peli si no hubiera perdido el autobús. I wouldn't have missed the start of the film if I hadn't missed the bus. So it's reversed, but exactly the same idea. Okay, now, this one I thought was nice to include because sometimes We can even use the continuous. You see waiting with ing. Absolutely fine to use the, well, in this case, it's conditional, it's conditional perfect continuous. Okay, I wouldn't have been waiting for hours. Sorry, I can't actually see it. It's obscured by the chat. I would have been waiting for hours if I hadn't booked in advance. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so in this case, we've got the modal would and then have been ing. Yeah, any dynamic verb you could use with that ing part. You know, would have been listening, would have been waiting, would have been speaking, whatever. Yeah, no problem. But you've still got the past participle. Been is the past participle, and then we follow it with an ing verb. Okay. Now, in this example, the word paper, it's pretty colloquial, but I think you can imagine it means newspaper. She could have applied. Okay. So you remember the same way, well, the same idea as with the second conditional. It's okay to use could instead of would. Yeah, if we want to add this idea of possibility, like it would have been possible, no problem at all. Yeah. So contractions. Yeah. If she'd, so in this case, she'd is she had, not she would. Yeah. So we have to be super careful with this, because when we see this contracted apostrophe D, sometimes it's had, sometimes it's would. Actually depends on the phrase. But in this case, we know that it's had because it's the past perfect. If she'd seen the advert in the paper, she could have, so listen to my pronunciation there, guys, could have. Yeah, it's like a schwa. We spoke about the schwa, the and then a v at the end, could have. And sometimes we don't even put the v, we just say coulda. Podría haber ido. I could have gone. I could have gone. Podría haber ido. Podría haber comido. Actually, that would be a could have eaten, yeah. Usually if the next one begins with a vowel, you're going to put the v, and if it doesn't, you can just put a coulda, yeah. Podría haber escuchado. Escuchado. I could have listened. I could have listened, yeah. I could have listened. Exactly the same with would have. Woulda. I would have listened, yeah. Habría escuchado. I would have listened. There you go, fantastic contractions, guys. We love them in speaking. What about, again, in this one, I've included some extra kind of information that's not strictly part of the third conditional, the little phrase, as I did. Same idea, third conditional. You would have done the same as I did if you had been there. Yeah. Again, it's reversed. We've got a little bit of extra information in there, but it's still a third conditional. Nothing crazy going on there. This is another aunque, even if they had paid me, yeah? Aunque me hubieran pagado. Yeah, so no habría bebido. I wouldn't have drunk that cheap whiskey. Yeah, I'm a connoisseur. I have my standards. I wouldn't have drunk that cheap whiskey even if they had paid me. Yeah, impossible. Even if they had paid me. Aunque me hubieran pagado. In this case, I want to make it more emphatic. Yeah. Now again, I could say it without. I wouldn't have drunk that cheap whiskey if they had paid me. But the meaning's a lot clearer, and it's a lot more emphatic if we add the word even to the phrase. Even if they had paid me. Yeah. I wouldn't have drunk that cheap whiskey, or I wouldn't have drunk. Yeah, didn't even pronounce the have. Wouldn't have. I wouldn't have drunk that cheap whiskey even if they had paid me. All right, great. So the clock is ticking. Let's go. Right or wrong? You ready, guys? And I'm going to give you a time limit this time, 10 seconds. So you have to be fast on the keyboards. Yeah? Let's go. Right or wrong? Tick tock, tick tock. Come on, somebody. Wrong. Good one. Say, I agree. It's wrong. Yeah. If she had asked me, yeah? Never mind, Alex. If she had asked me, yeah? If she had asked me nicely, I would have told her, yeah? All right, next one. If she had asked me nicely, I would have told her the answer. Good, next one. I would have drove more slowly if I'd known she was a nervous passenger. Right or wrong? The clock is ticking. Monse says right. Clock is ticking. Alex says right. David says right. Oh, it's wrong. It's wrong. I'm sorry, I caught you out again. Driven, yeah. Drive, drove, driven. Yeah. This one was tricky, yeah. So, exactly, yeah. Ag is the correct response to this one. Yeah, this one was so close, but yeah, drive, drove, driven. Sorry, I'm bad. I apologize. All right, what about this one? I can't read this one aloud because I can't see the beginning or the end because of Zoom. Right, Monse is going for right, Alex is going for right, David says right. I agree, this one's correct. Wonderful, guys, well done. All right, last one. Clock is ticking. Okay, time's up. It's correct. Yeah, this one's yeah, good, Monse, it's correct. Yeah, obviously there's a bit of extra information in the past simple at the end, any more than you did, but the rest of it's absolutely fine. You've got if with the past perfect, the first, the result clause first with the would have, no problem, absolutely correct. Good. All right, guys, cool. So mixed conditionals, here we go. Now there are two types of mixed conditionals, and as the name implies, we mix two types of conditionals when we make a mixed conditional. We mix a second conditional with a third conditional. And when I talk about type 1 and type 2, I'm talking about if we use the if clause from the second or third and the result clause from the second or third, and which way around we go. So type 1, we use the if clause from a third conditional. Past perfect, hypothetical past, if I had, if the Titanic hadn't sunk, etc., etc. The if clause from a third conditional. And we use the result clause from a second conditional. So we have a past hypothetical condition with a present hypothetical result. A past hypothetical condition with a present hypothetical result. And that's the structure. So you can see the first part looks like a third conditional, and the second part looks like a second conditional. And that's why we call it the mixed condition. And probably the best way to look at this is to compare it with a third conditional. Okay, so if the Titanic hadn't sunk, they wouldn't have made a film about it. I suppose it would have been a very boring movie. As the ship arrives in New York, there you go. Where's the drama? So if the Titanic hadn't sunk, they probably wouldn't have made a film about it. Now that's all in the past. The Titanic sinking is in the past. I think, was it James Cameron made the film in, I don't know, 1998 or something. So it's all in the past. Yeah, it's all in the past. So it's a third conditional. Yeah. It's all hypothetical and it's all in the past. Let's compare that now to a mixed conditional, type 1. So the first part's the same. If the Titanic hadn't sunk, the first part looks like a third conditional. But then the second part is a present consequence. It's a present result. The film wouldn't exist today. Yeah? What is it? Hundirse, sink, si no se hubiera hundido, la peli no existiría. Oy, I think this is pushing the limits of my Spanish. There you go. So if the Titanic hadn't sunk, the film wouldn't exist today. All right. So that's a second conditional. It's a past condition with a present hypothetical consequence. Good. So there's one more thing that we're going to look at, and that's the second type of mixed conditional. You can imagine what we're going to do here. Yeah, we're going to swap them around. So let's take a look. Type 2, the second type of mixed conditional. This time, the if clause comes from the second conditional instead of the third, and the result clause comes from the third conditional instead of the second. Okay. And there's your general structure. So again, if with the past tense, but it doesn't refer to the past, because it's a second conditional, it's a hypothetical present. So we have the past tense referring to a hypothetical present. Then we've got the comma, and then we've got our would have, and then any past participle. And once again, we're going to compare it to a third conditional. Okay, here we go. So the election was in the past. If Pedro hadn't been ill on election day, he was, unfortunately for Pedro, he was ill, he couldn't leave the house, but if he hadn't been ill on election day, he would have voted. So it's all hypothetical and it's all in the past. It's a past hypothetical. Okay, the result, the condition, it's all in the past, third condition. Now, it's weird to write about myself in the third person, but here we go. If Patrick was or were, no problem. If Patrick was or were Spanish, he would have voted in the last elections. So do you remember at the beginning of the presentation, in fact, a couple of times, I mentioned this, this idea of the anytime present, this anytime present, you know, Barcelona is on the coast. It was there yesterday, it is tomorrow. It's the same with me not being Spanish, yeah? I wasn't Spanish yesterday, I'm not Spanish today, I'm not going to be Spanish tomorrow. It's this anytime present. So say, si fuera, yeah? Si fuera español, podría haber votado. Would have voted. Habría votado. Simply, habría votado. You could also use could have voted. Podría haber votado. No problem. But if Patrick was Spanish, he would have voted in the last elections. So again, the first clause is a second conditional. Yeah. If Patrick was, or if Patrick were, no problem. We can use both. He would have voted. So now it starts to look like a third conditional. There you go. So the first part looks like a second, and the second part looks like a third, if that's not confusing. All right. And that, guys, is the end of our conditional stuff for today. Just a little, yeah, a lot of grammar, eh? Just a little sort of anecdote for you guys. I remember when I started kind of learning Spanish, and my teacher, Laura, really, really good teacher, and she asked me, she said, why are English people so obsessed with these conditionals? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, we don't have them in Spanish. And I said, what? You don't have conditionals? She's like, yeah, we don't have these numbers, you know, a zero conditional, a first conditional, a second. She's like, they don't exist. I thought that's impossible that they don't exist. And in the end, I kind of agree with her, you know. In English, we give you these numbers. We say, this is a zero, this is a first, this is a second. But then after we've taught the zero, the first, the second, the third, at the very end, we kind of say, okay, listen, guys, actually, you can just mix them. You see what I mean? It's almost like they're not really a thing, you know. We've invented this idea of conditionals, and we teach them to you as these really strict zero, first, second, and third. And then at the end, we say, actually, you can just mix them up. It's just grammar, you know, it's what it is. We're talking about verbal tenses, we're talking about moods, and in fact, you express what you want to express in the way you want to express it. Conditionals are only helpful, the idea of conditionals are only helpful to the extent that they help you learn English. You know, we kind of, when you're a beginner, we simplify things and we say, this is called a zero conditional, this is called a first conditional. And it's kind of, it's one of those truthful lies, you know, that teachers tell you to help you to learn. You know, it's kind of a truthful lie to simplify things at the beginning. And then when you reach about B2 level, we said to you guys, actually, it's a load of rubbish. You can just mix them. So that was basically the idea of the presentation today, was to teach you what the rules are and then how to break them when you make these mixed conditionals. All righty. So now we know what the rules are and that we can basically break them and make these mixed conditionals. Yeah. So the important thing isn't to have memorized, you know, this is a second conditional, this is a third conditional, this is a zero. It's to be able to express yourself and use these ideas. So you've got to think, okay, past hypothetical, past perfect, yeah? If I had, yeah? And you think, okay, it's present, I would go, no problem. Don't even think about the conditionals, just think, you know, present hypothetical, would, bare infinitive. Past hypothetical, would have, past participle, yeah? These are the important points, guys, that we can express ourselves well in hypothetical situations. And that's what we do with second, third, and mixed conditionals. It's just about being able to express hypothetical things. You know, that's what it's about, whether they refer to the present or the past. Okay, guys, well, listen, that's the end of today's webinar. If anyone has any quick questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. While you're thinking about that, I just want to thank everyone for attending. Lots of grammar today. Of course, we'll be doing another webinar next week. I haven't yet decided on the topic. Today's topic, conditionals, was actually a request from, I don't know if he's here today. If not, I hope he watches it later on YouTube, from Santi. Santi, perfect. There you go. Santi is here today. Wonderful. I can't see you, Santi. So this one was for you, Santi. I hope you appreciated it. Was, were, are the same. Yeah. If we're making a second conditional or one of the mixed conditionals in which we use that part of a second conditional. Were, you can use for everybody. If I were, if you were, if she were, if he were, if they were. Was, we have to follow the rules of the past simple. I was, he was, she was, it was, they was. No, that's never correct. They were. Okay. Mixed conditional a little bit more. Yeah, cool, Monse. Cool. Well, maybe we've got a class in a moment. Maybe we can try. Sounds great. Yeah, listen, these aren't things that someone teaches you once and you suddenly can use perfectly. These are things that we have to keep working on, you know. So of course, Monse, I'll be more than happy to practice some mixed conditionals in the class. It's, you know, the first step is to understand the theory. And the second step is to actually integrate them into your speaking. And it obviously, the second step is much harder than the first, you know. Understanding the concept is, you know, if you have a good teacher, that's the easy part. But actually integrating them into your speech, that's the more difficult part. So we'll work on that together once soon, for sure. All right, guys, nice one. Well, thanks again for coming. And well, I'll let you know what the topic of the next webinar is going to be by email, because I haven't decided yet. But thanks everyone for coming. And well, I'll see you guys next week. Cheers. Bye-bye. All the best. Thanks. Thanks, Santi. Nice one. My pleasure. Bye-bye.